Is today 95.1 FM Port Harcourt. News.
Good evening. This is the World News on your premium talk radio today 95.1 FM Port Harcourt. I'm Queen Chima. The headlines. Federal government clarifies no immediate plan to implement 5% fuel tax. Nupeng suspends nationwide strike. On the foreign scene, Nepal parliament set on fire after Prime Minister resigns over anti-corruption protests. Now, the detail. The federal government says there is no immediate plan to implement the 5% petroleum product tax contained in the new tax legislation. The Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edu, made this known at a media briefing in Abuja today. The tax has generated widespread anger among Nigerians, with organized labor issuing the government an ultimatum to cancel it or face industrial action. The federal government has released the approved subject offerings for Nigeria's newly revised basic and senior secondary education curriculum. The list announced by the Ministry of Education in a statement today is aimed at reducing subject overload, strengthening skills acquisition, and aligning the education system with global standards. Minister of Education Tunji Alausa, alongside Minister of State for Education Suwaiba Ahmed, said the reforms followed wide consultations with the Nigerian Educational Research and Development Council, WAEC, NECO, NBTE, NAPTEP, and other key stakeholders. Under the revised curriculum, pupils in primary 1 to 3 will now take between 9 and 10 subjects, including English studies, mathematics, one Nigerian language, basic science, physical and health education, Nigerian history, social and citizenship studies, cultural and creative arts, and either Christian religious studies or Islamic studies, while Arabic remains optional. For primary 4 to 6, the load increases to between 11 and 13 subjects, with the inclusion of basic digital literacy, pre-vocational studies, and French as an optional subject. At the junior secondary school level, JSS 1 to 3, students will be offered 12 to 14 subjects, with the addition of digital technologies, business studies, and a compulsory trade subject. Options for trade subjects include solar photovoltaic installation, fashion design, livestock farming, beauty and cosmetology, computer hardware and GSM repairs, and horticulture. The senior secondary school curriculum now mandates 5 core subjects: English language, general mathematics, 1 trade subject, citizenship and heritage studies, and digital technologies, while students would then choose from a wide pool of electives across sciences, humanities, businesses, and technical disciplines, ranging from physics, chemistry, and biology to government, literature, accounting, and visual arts, with trade and vocational subjects such as catering, craft, and horticulture also available. The National Assembly says the senator representing Kogi Central, Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, cannot resume office yet, despite completing a 6-month suspension. In the letter by the acting clerk to the National Assembly, Yahya Denzaria, dated September 4, 2025, the Senate acknowledged Akpoti-Uduaghan's notification of her intended return on September 4, the date she claimed marked the end of her suspension. The upper chamber said her 6-month suspension remains in force pending the outcome of a Court of Appeal case instituted against the Senate by Akpoti-Uduaghan. It insisted that no administrative action can be taken until the Court of Appeal delivers a verdict, arguing that her suspension took effect on March 6, 2025, and the matter is still sub judice. According to the letter, the Senate would only review her suspension after the court's pronouncement. Akpoti-Uduaghan was suspended on March 6 following allegations of insubordination after she rejected a change of her designated seat during plenary. The suspension, based on recommendations of the Senate Committee on Ethics, Privileges and Public Petitions, also stripped her of aides, office privileges, and salaries. Meanwhile, the People's Democratic Party has urged the lawmaker representing Kogi Central Senatorial District, Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, to prepare to resume her duties in the Senate. In a statement by its National Publicity Secretary, Debo Olugunaba, the party condemned the attempt by the clerk of the National Assembly to bar Senator Akpoti-Uduaghan from resuming her role following the 6-month suspension imposed on her by the Senate President, Senator Godswill Akpabio. The PDP described the action as a calculated attempt orchestrated by the Senator Akpabio-led All Progressives Congress Senate leadership to abridge the right of representation of the people of Kogi Central Senatorial District and deny them a voice at the nation's highest lawmaking body. The Nigerian Union of Petroleum and Natural Gas Workers, NUPENG, has suspended its two-day strike following a meeting with the Dangote Group today. The national president of NUPENG, Williams Akburia, confirmed the development. According to Akburia, the Dangote refinery team led by Sayu Dantata agreed to unionize its drivers. He said the meeting was summoned by the Department of State Services, DSS. Petroleum tanker drivers on Monday made good their threat to shun fuel loading due to the crisis between them and the Dangote refinery as a result of the unionization of tanker drivers. This was despite an appeal by the federal government that they shelve the plan. In the same vein, the Petroleum Products Retail Outlets Owners Association of Nigeria, Petron, has called off its nationwide strike. The National Public Relations Officer of Petron, Joseph Obele, said the strike was called off by the association following intense negotiations and a resolution mediated by ministers, security agencies and government agencies between Dangote Refinery and NUPENG. Petron apologized for the inconvenience caused to Nigerians during the short strike, acknowledging the disruptions and hardships faced by citizens. It said members have been directed to resume dispensing nationwide immediately, adding that normalcy is expected to return to the petroleum sector.
Strike, which involves suspension of dispensing and lifting, has been called off. This development is expected to bring relief to Nigerians. Petron's decision to call off the strike follows intense negotiation and a resolution mediated by honorable ministers, security agencies and government agencies also, between Dangote Refinery and NUPENG. Petron has apologized for the inconveniences caused Nigerians during the short strike, acknowledging the hardship faced by the citizens. Petron members have been directed to resume dispensing nationwide immediately at all the retail outlets. Normalcy is expected to return the petroleum sector as fuel supply returns to normal, with depots and filling stations resuming operations.
Petron had declared a nationwide strike in solidarity with NUPENG, which alleged that new truck drivers at Dangote Refinery were being hired on the condition that they do not join the union. Troops of the 6th Division Nigerian Army have dismantled gun-running syndicates notorious for trafficking small arms and light weapons to criminals across the Niger Delta region. The operation, which was intelligence-led and painstakingly executed, resulted in the interception of 2 English pistols, 4 locally fabricated pistols and a double-barrel gun. According to a statement by the Acting Deputy Director, 6th Division Army Public Relations, Lieutenant Colonel Danjuma, the criminals were engaged in arms deals using the Cross River, Akwa Ibom Rivers and Bayelsa States corridor for the discreet movement of illicit weapons across the region. The statement revealed that the gun runners, identified as Innocent Day, also known as Selebobo, God knows Alabo Avo, and Godwin Osik, were apprehended at different times through intelligence-driven operations. Lieutenant Colonel Danjuma added that the suspects and the recovered arms have been handed over to the relevant agency for prosecution. He further disclosed that troops consolidating ongoing anti-oil theft operations across the Niger Delta between August 25 and 7 September 2025 made significant gains, including the destruction of 6 illegal refining sites, the arrest of 35 criminals, and the confiscation of over 114,000 litres of stolen products. Those arrested, according to the statement, included 3 gun runners, oil thieves, and all others involved in sundry crimes. You're listening to the World News on Today95.1 FM, Voice of the People. After the break, more news, foreign and sports stories. Do stay with us.
Every day, every hour, when the big stories break, depend on our 24-hour news team to bring you the latest. Today, 95.1 FM.
Thank you so much for staying with us. Now the rest of our stories. The River State government has sustained its sensitization and education campaign on flood management and control. Chairman of the River State Central Working Flood Committee, Ibibia Worika, while addressing delegates from different local government areas, assured that the state government will continue to invest in flood control infrastructure, improve drainage systems, and strengthen disaster management agencies. Worika, however, emphasized that flood emergency preparedness, management, and control is a shared responsibility. Represented by the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Orwell Okorinko, Worika said it has become imperative to ensure that the impact of flooding is mitigated and managed to reduce fatalities, adding that the government is also strengthening environmental laws to curb indiscriminate refuse dumping and illegal sand mining. On his part, the head of operations at the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, Eric Bodaye, attributed recurring flooding to poor town planning and rising population pressures. Bodaye urged citizens to be more responsive to their environment and called for implementation of both structural and non-structural measures to reduce the effects of flooding, including the creation of dams and reservoirs, levees and flood walls, flood control channels, and storm water management systems.
Please, I am begging the Executive Chairman, thank God you're on board. Please, those areas that have caused safe ground for your people, ensure that they are well kept and prepared. By the time the water go back, you can relocate to your community. Don't say, I will stay here and fight this water. Please, it is very, very, very important. Once water comes and it's very overwhelming, leave the community. Evacuate to a safe ground. They will take care of you there till you come back to your community. I have discussed this with the flood committee, and it's also expected that we are going to, that's where you are, the Central Committee on Flood Management. We are going to have a central control system for eventually the water comes and all of that, where we can do coordination. Go. I said it, you leave your community to a safe place. So if you go your sister, your brother place where you don't say go good to stay till water come up. Not say my things there, I go down here with the water, you don't walk, please.
Also speaking, William Sinyama from the Ministry of Environment sensitized participants on how harmful environmental practices worsen flooding impact in other regions, as he advocated for the introduction of a flood insurance policy by both government and the public to enable citizens to recover from losses when flooding occurs.
Why is it that Nigeria is supplying electricity to some country, whereas we don't have electricity in Nigeria? Damming is not just only for water, it is also for irrigation and other purposes. But majorly, if it is for hydroelectricity, then you can dam on international level. You go into agreement. You can't dam because you can't just wake up one morning and dam. No. If it has to do with a river or a stream shared by intercontinentals, then you need to compensate the man upstream. That is why if they tap upstream, the communities down may experience danger, which is what we are going through. So you must compensate for it. That's why all these dams you see.
Today FM's Sandra Kenneth reports that about 14 local government areas in Zone 3 had their representatives and delegates present, while 7 local government chairmen, permanent secretaries and directors of various ministries also attended the lectures, which lasted several hours at the Kana Council Secretariat. The River State Police Command has declared Joy Nwokewiro, the 17-year-old daughter of Prince Wiro, national coordinator of the Center for Basic Rights Protection and Accountability Campaign, missing. In a statement, the command spokesperson, Superintendent of Police Gracie Renga-Koko, described Joy as fair in complexion, about 5 feet tall and fluent in English and Ikuri. She's a native of Iba in Imoha local government area of River State. SP Irenga-Koko stated that the teenager left home on Monday, September 8, 2025 and has not been seen since. The PRO added that all efforts to trace her whereabouts have so far proved abortive and urged anyone with useful information to contact her father, Wiro, the police control room on 0803 200 3514 or the nearest police station. The Supreme Forum of Ikore Government to recognize traditional rulers has advised the chairman of the 4 Ikore-speaking local government areas in River State to embrace unity, collaboration and community-centered governance as a foundation for sustainable development across the region. The statement jointly signed by the chairman of the forum, Ezo Haivo, the third of Evo Kingdom, His Majesty Leslie Ike and His Royal Highness Ben Ugo. The rulers said they were compelled to emphasize the need for synergy between political leadership and traditional institutions in Ikore land to guarantee prosperity. The forum addressed the chairman of Obiakpo, Port Harcourt City Ikore and Imoha local government areas, urging them to pursue policies that reflect the collective interests of the Ikore people. The statement frowned at past practices where the Ikore Speaking Council chairman worked in isolation, stressing that they are one people with a shared history, culture and destiny. The royal fathers also expressed concern over what they described as political fragmentation among Ikore leaders, warning that failure to close ranks could undermine future development efforts and weaken the influence of the Ikore ethnic group in the state's political landscape. The traditional rulers further proposed the institution of an annual Ikore Unity and Development Summit, which they said would bring together traditional rulers, elected officials, youth leaders, women's groups, and civil society organizations to chart a common course for the ethnic nation. And on the foreign scene, Egypt has sent a letter of protest to the United Nations Security Council over Ethiopia's inauguration of its Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, describing it as a unilateral measure that violates international law. In the letter, Egypt accused Ethiopia of attempting to give a false cover of acceptance and legitimacy to the dam. It added that Cairo reserves the right to take all measures permitted under international law and the UN Charter to defend the existential interests of its people. Where elsewhere, Prime Minister of Nepal, KP Sharma Oli, has resigned amid Nepal's worst unrest in decades as public anger mounts over the death of 19 anti-corruption protesters in clashes with police on Monday. Today, crowds set fire to parliament in the capital, Kathmandu, sending thick black smoke billowing in the sky. Government buildings and the houses of political leaders were attacked around the country, with 3 more deaths reported today. Amid the chaos, jail officials said 900 inmates managed to escape from 2 prisons in Nepal's western districts. The demonstrations were triggered by a ban on social media platforms. It was lifted on Monday, but then protests had swelled into a mass movement. Nepal's army chief issued a statement accusing demonstrators of taking advantage of the current crisis by damaging, looting and setting fire to public and private property. To end the news, here is a summary of the major stories. The federal government has clarified that there is no immediate plan to implement the 5% fuel tax. You heard that Nupeng has suspended its nationwide strike. Another foreign scene, we told you that Nepal parliament has been set on fire after the Prime Minister resigned over anti-corruption protests. That was the news, as edited by Funanya Obeme Ndukwe. For comment and inquiries, please call 0818 389 2850 or send your emails to news@todayfmlive.com. You can also read our stories on www.todayfmlive.com. My name is Queen Chima. Thank you so much for listening. Good evening.
Today's news, today's entertainment, today's sports, today's issues. Today on Today 95.1 FM, Port Harcourt.
They say wahala this one wahala be like bicycle. They just waiting they happen. Now for Today 95.1 FM, 5 p.m. Monday to Friday, bomb quem. Now here you go here, waiting they happen for Niger and Obodo the world. Now that time where we they bring you Ogbonga to them, where go shock you. You go wonder, say a person do like this. Now so we they bring them can give you acid the hot. Now where would they find way to sweep this country? Don't run. Because they are blood in the japa. You say this one, no worry. When time I reach, I'll say I want to make I see where they go. Homeland is homeland. Me, I go open gate for them. I no go be get man at that time for airport. Waiting they happen. Make you know Miss Mazi Ike God Ike Machuku and MC Kuro for waiting they happen. You go enjoy yourself. No forget to say woman they chop our recharge card woto. I don't tell you say this place na education center. As you sit down here with us from Monday to Friday, you go enjoy waiting they happen. Waiting they happen. Make you know miss them at all.
Today 95.1 FM, where news meets insight, sports meets passion, and entertainment meets excellence. Expert analysis from seasoned professionals and our top analysts, informing, educating, and entertaining you. Your voice, your station. We are the voice of the people.
Talk radio.
I listen to a lot of talk radio.
95.1 FM.
Please listen to this infomercial.
My good people of Pitakwa, I dey greet you now, both the people went there for the environment. And this is hello to they come from Elder. My name na Elder Oluwole. From Elder Oluwole Herbal Home. Wetin we dey want talk about today na about diabetes. Yes, diabetes. Wetin dey cause diabetes? Diabetes na serious problem o. When e be say e don dey kill up to 1 million people in a year as we dey talk so. This diabetes wey we dey talk so, anybody fit get am o. Diabetes dey happen when our body no fit process all the sugar for the body stream. The complication of the problem fit lead to heart attack, stroke, blindness, kidney failure, lower limb amputation. Person when get this problem fit no know. Yes, e fit no know say e get am. Now wetin dey cause this diabetes sef? When we eat, our body dey break carbohydrate into sugar. One hormone when the name na insulin, when pancreas dey produce, go come instruct our body cell to take in the sugar for energy. Now wetin dey cause this diabetes? Wetin we dey eat, our body dey break carbohydrate into sugar. One hormone when the name na insulin, when pancreas dey produce, go come instruct our body cell to take in the sugar for energy. Insulin na the hormone for our body when they produce pancreas, when they help the body to absorb sugar and glucose. Na different type of diabetes na in dey o. The first one, the pancreas go stop to produce insulin, so glucose go gather for the bloodstream. This one dey happen when infection don overtake the body. The second one, the pancreas no dey produce enough insulin, so e go dey work like say e no get energy. Na be say e go dey work swegbe. Wetin be the symptom of this diabetes wey we dey talk about so? You go dey feel tasty, you go dey piss anyhow, especially for night. You go dey tire like say you carry heavy load. You go come dey lose weight. Your eye sef e no go dey see clearly again. If you can't get wound nko, na im be say the wound no go gree go again. If wetin we dey talk about so dey worry you, abeg make you go see your doctor for more advice. Remember, the person wey bring una this enlightenment program na Elder Oluwole from Elder Oluwole Herbal Home. We dey for the ongoing herbal exhibition when they go on for Isaac Borough Park for my one flyover Port Harcourt inside Rivers State. Our telephone number na 081 32 57 5717. Una hear am o, 081 32 57 5717. And we dey for stand 8. I call am again, stand 8. Remember say diabetes, the main wahala na when blood no flow wella for your body and e no reach the different part of the body when the blood suppose to reach. Na there the risk of nerve dey start o. Your body no go dey feel well again. You go dey feel pain all over your body. Your eye sef e go follow the wahala. Your wound, before you know, wound don show for your leg. When this happen, you no go fit dey walk like a real man because too much sugar don enter your body. Abeg o, take care of yourself. Make madam no ask you, oga, how far? Big man food no be for small pikin now. As a man, when your body no fit saddle like a soldier as a man, you no go fit stand gidigba. That sign sef don show say the blood vessel e don dey block o. That one also sef fit cause risk of heart disease, nerve damage, kidney damage, eye problem, even skin problem and hearing problem. If you dey experience any of this is what we talk so, abeg go see your doctor. My name again na Elder Oluwole from Elder Oluwole Herbal Home. We dey for the herbal exhibition for Isaac Borough Park my one flyover for inside the Port Harcourt. Our stand na stand 8. You hear am again o, stand 8. You fit gree us for 081 32 57 5717. I greet una, my country people. Stay healthy.
And that was a paid infomercial.
Talk radio. I listen to a lot of talk radio.
95.1 FM. Wake up to today's quest, where breakfast on the radio is full course. We start with some motivation to ignite the spark in you for a great day. Then a full interactive sports show on Sport Attack 6:30 a.m. Unbeatable and concise news reports on the world news at 7 a.m. And our newspaper review segment now 7:30 a.m. Oh yes, 7:30 a.m. The scoops and the commentaries from our esteemed panelists. Today's quest 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. on Today 95.1 FM Port Harcourt. Miss it, you miss out.
Talk radio. I listen to a lot of talk radio.
95.1 FM.
BBC World Service. I'm Charles Gitonga in Nairobi with Focus on Africa. After 14 years of construction and controversy, Ethiopia inaugurates the Grand Renaissance Dam. What does it represent for the country?
When it comes to this project, it seems to be unifying people not just across political and ethnic lines, but across generations as well.
Who are the separatist leaders indicted in the U.S. for suspected crimes in Cameroon?
U.S. federal officials said that these two were using the United States as a base for their operations, to facilitate killings, bombings, maimings, abductions back in Cameroon.
And London-born Carlo Acutis becomes the first millennial Catholic saint. How does one ascend to sainthood?
In the eyes of the church, all of us are first of all called to sainthood. Being a saint is a vocation, it's another way of following the footsteps of Christ.
That's all on the BBC tonight in Focus. First, the news.
I'm Debbie Russ with the BBC News. Hello. Israel has carried out a strike in the Qatari capital Doha, targeting the senior leadership of Hamas. They are said to have been holding a meeting to discuss the latest Gaza ceasefire proposal. It's reported that Khalil al-Hayya, the group's leader and chief negotiator, was among those targeted. The Qatari government has condemned the strike, calling it reckless and cowardly. More from our correspondent, Tom Bateman.
For the leadership in Qatar, it might not feel like enough for them to have a very strongly worded statement. You've got to remember these are the people that, along with the Egyptians, were leading nearly 2 years' worth of negotiations, indirect mediation between Israel and Hamas. And now you have one party to that conflict killing the other on the sovereign territory of the mediator.
Reports in the Israeli media say the strikes were cleared with the United States first, but in a post on social media, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the action was a wholly independent Israeli operation. Our correspondent Paul Adams has this assessment from Jerusalem.
One of the most important American air bases in the region, if not the most important air base, is just a few miles away at Al Udeid on the outskirts of Doha. Frankly, to my mind, it is inconceivable that the Israelis, if they flew some kind of airborne operation to Doha, would not have let the Americans know that their planes were approaching, just as a matter of safety, frankly, for the Israelis. It is highly likely that the Americans were told about this, and if that is the case, then the White House had an opportunity to say no, and appears not to have taken that opportunity.
The International Criminal Court has opened its war crimes case against the fugitive Ugandan rebel leader Joseph Kony. Its first ever confirmation of charges hearing without the accused being present. Kony faces 39 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity, allegedly committed through his Lord's Resistance Army. Leonie von Braun is an ICC prosecutor.
All his essential contributions are directly linked to the attacks on the IDP camps, the abduction and enslavement of people, and the use of children in hostilities. Throughout the charged period, Mr. Kony regularly issued orders to LRA commanders to attack, kill, mistreat civilians.
Lawyers hope the hearing could set a precedent for other wanted figures unlikely to be detained, such as President Putin and the Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says a Russian airstrike on a village in the east of the country has killed more than 20 people who were waiting to collect their pension. He said many others were injured during the attack on the village of Yarovar, about 10 kilometres from the current front line. World News from the BBC. More than 50 civilians have been killed in an attack by suspected Islamist militants in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. A local administrator said the militants, affiliated with the Islamic State group, descended on a group of mourners with machetes and guns. Here's our Africa correspondent, Anne Soy.
A witness said an entire village was massacred. People had come together to attend a funeral at Ntoyo Nziapanda Mangorejipa village in Lubero territory of North Kivu province. The militants struck at night, slashing most of their victims with machetes and burning others in their homes. Attacks from ADF, an extremist group that's pledged allegiance to the Islamic State, have escalated in recent weeks. Dozens of schools remain closed out of fear, and residents have been fleeing the area. Congolese forces, backed by Ugandan troops, have been battling the group in the border region.
The head of the Paris police force has warned that protests planned for tomorrow could see transport halted and other public infrastructure under attack. A movement calling itself Let's Block Everything has called for anti-government demonstrations across France. The movement is new and appears to include supporters from both the far left and far right. Supreme Court judges in Brazil have begun voting in the final phase of the trial of the former president, Jair Bolsonaro. He's been accused of plotting a military coup against President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva after losing a tightly contested election at the end of 2022. He denies the charges. Ethiopia has officially switched on Africa's largest hydroelectric dam. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, alongside Kenya's William Ruto and Djibouti's Ismail Omar Guelleh, unveiled a plaque before powering up the turbines. The dam is expected to double Ethiopia's electricity output and supply power to neighbouring countries. That's the latest BBC News.
Hello, I'm Charles Gitonga and here is what's coming up for you on this edition of Focus on Africa. After 14 years of construction and controversy, Ethiopia has inaugurated the Grand Renaissance Dam along the Nile River. However, this raises deep concerns for Egypt. Who are the separatist leaders indicted in the U.S. for suspected crimes in Cameroon?
These are men who are resident in the United States but of Cameroonian origin, and they are said to be leaders of the Ambazonia Defense Forces, that's the military wing of the Ambazonia Governing Council.
And London-born Carlo Acutis, who died in 2006, becomes the first millennial to be made saint by the Catholic Church. What is the process of becoming a saint?
Saints are just ordinary people who did ordinary things extraordinary. First of all, it is something that happens after you've gone, and in very many cases, even to start the process, it has to be minimum of 5 or so years after you're gone.
It's Tuesday, September 9th. First, we go to Ethiopia. The country is today celebrating the opening of a mega project that could prove to be a game changer in many ways. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is Africa's largest hydroelectric project. It has taken 14 years to build and at a cost of $5 billion. The massive project is expected to deliver electricity to nearly half of Ethiopia's 135 million people who are currently not connected to the national power grid. Getanesh lives in a small farming community in southern Ethiopia. Her village is on the outskirts of Hawassa, one of the country's major cities, yet it does not have access to electricity. Getanesh and her family use kerosene-powered lamps for light and firewood for cooking.
When we run out of fuel, we might spend nights in darkness. Sometimes we use firewood as a source of light. Sometimes we can't even have enough wood.
Now, she and her husband are hopeful that the new dam will bring them electric power and herald the dawn of a brighter day. Here is her husband, Germesa Gelcha.
I feel incredibly happy because this is our shared ambition. I don't even have words to explain my excitement.
At just under 6,700 kilometers, or 4,200 miles, the Nile is one of the world's longest rivers. It has two major tributaries, the White Nile and the Blue Nile. The first stretches from its farthest stream in Burundi through Lake Victoria, flowing through Uganda and South Sudan. The Blue Nile runs from Ethiopia to Khartoum, Sudan's capital, where the two streams meet before flowing into Egypt as the Nile and to the Mediterranean Sea. Ethiopia's dam is built on the Blue Nile. For Ethiopians who helped fund the mega project, the dam is a symbol of progress and energy independence. However, Egypt and Sudan say the dam breached international law and would cause grave consequences to the two downstream countries. Professor Abbas Mohamed Sharaki is a geologist from the University of Cairo. He expressed his deep concern over Egypt's water security and survival.
Egypt is so concerned about the GERD because the river Nile is the main source of Egypt, and about 97% of our water from the Nile. And the Blue Nile provides the Nile River by about 60%. So GERD is controlling 6% of the Nile water and the Egyptian annual share. And the Blue Nile is an international river or shared river between Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt. Constructing any water project like dams or like the GERD in our case, we should negotiate, we should consult, and we should have an agreement because this is international water and the dam will control the water for Sudan and Egypt.
Professor Abbas Mohamed Sharaki from the University of Cairo. I heard more from our regional correspondent in Ethiopia, Kalkidan Yibeltal.
The mood is certainly of joy and celebration, particularly among people who just realized how this dam has seen the finish line after 14 years of construction. It's not as exciting as it was 3 years ago when the dam first began generating electricity. That was when one of the turbines began generating around 375 megawatts of electricity, so that was a huge moment. So it's not as exciting or as joyful as it was because by now a lot of people have come accustomed to the reality that the dam is now on the verge of being fully operational. However, there are quite a number of things that the authorities have planned, and a lot of people seem to be unified around the fact that even in a country like Ethiopia where there is quite a division among people along ethnic lines and there are ongoing conflicts in a number of places across the country, this dam and what it means seems to unify people in pride and in joy.
Egypt, Sudan, those two countries have opposed the plan to build and develop this dam, and they are even more worried that the dam is getting inaugurated and Ethiopia is pretty much forging ahead with the plan for what they aim to achieve. Some of the neighbors, those two specifically, are very concerned about this. I wonder if ordinary people, in the streets and towns and villages of Ethiopia are able to look at these two issues and reconcile them in some way.
The position held by Egypt and Sudan from the very beginning has been very clear. They feel that their essential water supplies might be threatened by this dam, and also they're concerned by the fact that there isn't any binding agreement holding these three countries together in how to use the Nile waters, and particularly they have this fear around times of drought. The Ethiopian position has been it doesn't have any aim or any plan to hurt these two downstream countries, and the dam is not going to limit or restrict the water flow in any ways.
So it's been 14 years in the making. Has the project become in some ways a defining symbol for the successive Ethiopian governments?
Absolutely. It is one of those things that unified not just the people, but, different governments. Even if one government overthrows another one and then, essentially declared it as sort of as a hostile figure. It seems that when it comes to the Nile waters, when it comes to this dam, the governments, the authorities seem to be unified about that. Even now, when you speak to senior government officials, they speak starting from the imperial era. They say that Ethiopia's last emperor, Haile Selassie, had a plan to utilize this water back in the 1960s and 70s, but he couldn't do it because of the status and the state that the country was in. And then it was started by the late Prime Minister Meles Zenawi in 2011, and after that another Prime Minister came, and then he continued that project, and now a different Prime Minister in Abiy Ahmed who essentially saw it to be completed.
The BBC's Kalkidan Yibeltal in Ethiopia. Next to Cameroon. This Central African nation is predominantly French-speaking. However, for years, militants have been fighting for the independence of Cameroon's two Anglophone regions. They want their own state and claim that they've faced marginalization by the Francophone majority government. The struggle for power has led to a conflict between the separatist fighters and the government forces, killing almost 6,000 people and displacing many others. Now it's emerged that their cause is led and supported by two men living in Minnesota in the United States. The two, who are naturalized U.S. citizens, are leaders of the Ambazonia Defense Forces, the military wing of the separatist movement, and were indicted last week by federal prosecutors. U.S. prosecutors say the two men were allegedly planning attacks on local civilians and officials in Cameroon. If convicted, they could face life in prison. Meanwhile, the militants have declared a 3-week lockdown in Cameroon's English-speaking nations. The BBC correspondent, Paul Njie, is in the capital, Yaoundé, and I began by asking him to tell us about these two men who've been indicted in the U.S.
So the two men indicted in the U.S. are Benedict Kwa and Pascal Wongbi. These are men who are resident in the United States. They are naturalized citizens, but of Cameroonian origin, and they are said to be leaders of the Ambazonia Defense Forces. That's the military wing of the Ambazonia Governing Council. And, U.S. federal officials said that these two were using the United States as a base for their operations, to facilitate killings, bombings, maimings, abductions back in Cameroon.
So the reason this is all happening is because, there's a Francophone part of Cameroon, which is, I assume, the larger one and more represented perhaps, and also there is an Anglophone part of the country. Just give us the context around why and how this is happening, and also who the Ambazonia are.
So there's currently an armed conflict going on in the English-speaking part of the country, and as you rightly said, Cameroon is a bilingual country with both French and English as the main or official languages, and so the Francophone part makes up about 80%, while the Anglophone part makes up about 20%. And there had been a growing perception of marginalization of the Anglophone minority by the Francophone-dominated government, and so that led to some clashes by separatists. It began really as some form of protests or strike actions by Anglophone lawyers and teachers, but that later morphed into an armed conflict when separatists also took up arms in 2017 to say they are fighting for a breakaway state. So yeah, basically these are the things that have led to that. Since then, separatists have imposed a boycott on education. Economic activities have been grounded as a result of that, and about 6,000 people have been killed and thousands or hundreds of thousands more displaced.
Okay, so what role then do these two accused play in the Anglophone part of Cameroon?
Yeah, so they are being accused of conspiring to kill, kidnap, maim and injure people abroad because they are based in the U.S., so they are seen as those commandeering the actions on the ground from the English-speaking regions. And, they are accused of spearheading the kidnap of people, of local officials, and civilians. So basically, they are part of just a wider group of armed groups in this Anglophone region that have been accused of rights abuses and atrocities. And people believe that with their indictment in the U.S., it now will open the way for several other cases. But I should note that this is not, the first case of indictment in the U.S. of people accused of links with the crisis back home.
If you could tell us about Ambazonia and also who the Ambazonia Defense Forces are and their role in this case.
So Ambazonia is the name that the separatist movements have attributed to the country which they seek to create, and they believe that the English-speaking minority deserves to be under that single establishment, but the Cameroonian government has been categorical in its denial that the country is seceding. So the government has said that Cameroon remains one and indivisible, and that, there is no room for separation. But the separatists say that they do not belong to the country where there is the marginalization. So you see there is this conflicting view, and since 2017, when they declared their independence, they believe that they are in control of the English-speaking regions, and that's why they are able, in their view, to order lockdowns, to order ghost towns, and to order that schools be shut. And of course, they believe that that's their own way of assuming control.
Just paint us a picture of, what life is like in the Anglophone parts of, Cameroon, where this group is said to be in control.
It's interesting, Charles, that we're having this conversation right now, because as we speak, there's currently a lockdown in the English-speaking parts of the country imposed by the separatists to forestall school resumption. This, they believe, is to be done for the next 3 weeks. They are saying that they do not want the school system commanded by the government in Yaoundé, to have an influence over the people in the English-speaking regions. That's why they are putting this lockdown to show that they still have some level of control. And basically, when they call for lockdowns, what it means is that the economic activities will be grounded, circulation will also be brought to a halt, and schools will be shut, businesses, premises shut, and that's the reality here. Although I should note that as things stand, while a majority of the schools in the English-speaking regions remain shut, there are a few that are open, notably some government-run institutions and some private and confessional schools that are opening, but the attendance is dismal and not as compared to that of schools in the Francophone regions of the country, which have gained steam and which have fully resumed.
So for these people, ordinary people that are affected in the way that you've described, do they feel just as strongly that there needs to be a separate country for them?
To be honest, Charles, it depends on who you ask. There are those split within the lines, some who are of the opinion that there needs to be a united country. There are others who believe that the country should have been united but in a federal system. And then there are those who believe that, well, if things aren't working, the only way is to go their separate ways.
The BBC's correspondent, Paul Njie, in the Cameroonian capital, Yaoundé. This is Focus on Africa from the BBC World Service. Today, we are diving into an extraordinary story of faith, technology, and a teenager who just made history. A 15-year-old computer whiz who loved coding, playing PlayStation, and helping the homeless is now officially a saint. London-born Carlo Acutis, who has an Italian background, became the first millennial saint in a ceremony presided over by Pope Leo in a packed St. Peter's Square in the Vatican City. The teenager died in 2006 from leukemia, but in his short life, he created websites documenting miracles as a way of spreading Catholic teachings, leading some to nickname him God's influencer. His mother, Antonia Salzano, remembers what he was like.
In everything he was advanced. And he started very shortly to ask me questions about religion. I had the feeling that Carlo was special since he was small, because he was very generous, and it was not normal generosity. Carlos followed the example of St. Francis. He was very sensible to the poor. For example, when he was 9 years old, we used to live in the center of Milano. Around our house there were a lot of beggars living in the street. And Carlo used to question himself, I have everything, I have the love of my parents, and these people has nothing. And so he starts to bring sleeping bags, to bring blankets, to bring food to these people. Carlo was somebody that if he met somebody in the street, even if he didn't know, he smiled, say hello. He had a special gift.
Carlo's canonization got many people talking about it.
I find his story to be very inspiring, as it showcases a young person with a deep love for God and how he was able to show this love within the modern context. An example I'd like to give is the fact that one of the sacrifices he made for God was limiting his video game playing time to just an hour.
The story of Carlo is one that excites me as a young person living in Ghana and also being a Catholic. It's an example to all young people around the world that with your skill set, your small craft, something that you're doing in your own corner, you can also make impact and become a saint.
To understand more about Carlo's story and what his sainthood means in today's world, I spoke with Bishop Matthew Hassan Kuka, the current bishop of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Sokoto, Nigeria. He started by telling me what a saint means in the eyes of the church.
In the eyes of the church, all of us are first of all called to sainthood, because being a saint is a vocation. It's another way of following the footsteps of Christ through the quality and nature of the work that they did. The church over the years evolved a methodology for identifying men and women across time and communities who lived exemplary lives and who could be elevated to sainthood. In doing that, of course, you were, let me use a secular word, democratizing the process, in the sense that people could now not see sainthood as something that is so distant from them, but something that is very close to them.
How does one then become a saint? What kind of life do you need to have led? Things that the church would later consider and start you on the process of becoming one.
This is not a life that you have a notebook beside you. No, it doesn't work that way. Because saints are just ordinary people who did ordinary things extraordinarily. First of all, it is something that happens after you've gone, and in very many cases, even to start the process, it has to be minimum of 5 or so years after you're gone before people start thinking and talking about those possibilities.
So what is the process like?
There are no applications. You don't write an application. As I said, it is something that happens after you've gone, and then people begin to think about the kind of life that you lived. Then you open up a process, you open a file, and then you start a process of documentation. So first of all, there's a conversation around the issue, and then of course there has to be an agreement by the local ordinary, that is the bishop. This process is worthwhile, and if it is deemed through listening to voices and listening to testimonies that this person has lived a life that is worthy of emulation, then you start that process. And that process starts with records of the various testimonies and activities, and then people go into prayers, listen to testimonies, and as the process scales, people begin to write the kind of testimonies, what they thought this person did that is worthy of emulation. Then, of course, the first thing is people begin to pray for miracles, and it could be somebody who is suffering from cancer, somebody who has a difficult problem or whatever. If there is a claim of a miraculous healing, for example, the process is quite technical in the sense that you have to have medical reports, you have to have scientific experts examine the claims that are being made, and all those things will be subjected to the rigorous test before they are followed through. So if it is established, for example, that a miracle has been worked, one miracle is enough to elevate you to a status of blessedness. So the process then goes on like that until finally you are declared a saint.
So, Bishop, let's just, if we may, talk about that point about miracles. And I know this is a deeply spiritual process, and, in the spiritual realm, you may not understand everything as a human being.
In this particular case, it has to be a case that, for example, somebody that may be suffering from a disease that the world considers to be incurable. It depends on what the issues are. Of course, miracle, the concept of miracle has become, it's a seriously discounted concept now, especially in Africa, where the world is now subjected to all kinds of interpretations, But for the purpose of what we're talking about, if you survive a boat accident or a car accident and you claim that to be a miracle because you're free to submit whatever you think, but that has to pass muster. It has to go through a very rigorous process of investigation. And in the course of that investigation, of course, some of the things that need to be discounted will be discounted even before, they leave the table or of the postulator.
Let's look at Carlo Acutis. He died in 2006 when he was just 15 years old. He is now a saint. How unprecedented is it for someone this young to get into sainthood? We are even calling him the millennial saint.
I think what is very important is that I think the church in its own wisdom has actually seen the need especially in this age of AI, that young people have somebody that they can look up to. And what is also beautiful about all of this is that, this young man, what is beautiful about it is that now young people can understand. Not everybody is necessarily going to do it through the computer. There are many ways of young people witnessing, but it is that the doors are open beyond age, beyond gender. Now the young millennials have somebody that they can look up to.
That's Bishop Matthew Hassan Kuka in Nigeria. Focus on Africa was put together by Mark Wilberforce, Sunita Nahar, and Yvette Twagira Maria in London. Makochi Okafo was in Lagos and Jewel Kiriungi in Nairobi. Patricia Whitehorn was the senior journalist in charge, and Nick Randell, our technical producer. Our editors are Mariam Abdallah, Andrea Lombard, and Alice Mudengi. I'm Charles Gitonga, and we'll speak again next time.
Talk radio. I listen to a lot of talk radio.
95.1 FM. What's a successful business without sales? And what is sales without an audience? Well, do you know that you